Dead Island 2 is out soon after a really long wait, so what's the deal? We're gathering up everything known about the game up until now through previews and news and trailers and stuff like that, so here's 10 quick things you need to know before jumping into this game. Let's get started off with number 10 and talk about what it is and who made it. Now, Dead Island 2, for the basics, it's a first-person zombie fighting action game that can be played solo or with up to 3 friends cooperatively. It's being developed by Dambuster, the guys who made the rough Homefront: The Revolution game. This is actually their second time rescuing a game in development hell. I mean, this thing, Dead Island 2, was revealed back in 2014 and has changed developers multiple times. Remember the Spec Ops: The Line developers Jaeger were attached to this? It sounds like the development was almost completely reset around 2018, and this version of the game is mostly Dambuster's work, according to them at least. Now, you choose to play as one of 6 possible survivors, each with their own strengths and weaknesses as you try to survive this whole zombie onslaught. Now, you can't swap characters after you pick them. After you pick one, you're locked in, so just keep that in mind. Each character has a unique feel to them. Certain characters have low health but high damage potential, some are slower and tankier, and like the original, there is a focus on salvaging weapons. Nothing lasts forever, weapons eventually break, so it seems like you're always looking for new stuff to replace what you've got. And unlike the original that billed itself as kind of an zombie RPG, this game, from what we can see, doesn't have as many RPG systems as the original. Enemy health bars and damage values are still there though. Otherwise, Dead Island 2 looks to be an unpretentious throwback to the Xbox 360 PS3 era in a way that might be satisfying, or maybe it might feel old-fashioned. We'll have to see for ourselves when it actually releases. Next, over at number 9, Dead Island 2 is not an open world game. Yeah, a lot of people did not see that coming, and even though it hit headlines a couple weeks back, some people still haven't realized that. So don't go in expecting something like Dying Light. Depending on who you are, or if you're burned out on open world games, this might be good news for you. Just know that this is a linear action game that's split into large zones. This isn't like Dying Light where it's mostly just 1 or 2 very large areas. This is more contained and linear. And once you're done with an area and the side stuff and the story, you move on to the next zone. Set in a fictionalized version of Los Angeles, the story is that you're a survivor of a plane crash trying to get out of the city. Then you get bit by a zombie and discover that you're immune. Now you've got to escape the city with the help of survivors that you meet along the way, and it sounds a lot like the first Dead Island. The story isn't really the focus. It's about bashing zombies and exploring detailed environments. That doesn't mean there isn't stuff to do though. There are the usual selection of side quests and collectibles to get, just in a more linear package. Each district sounds fairly large with a lot of stuff to do, so it's not like the game is just a series of corridors or hallways or anything, but it's not as open as a full open world game. Next, over at number 8, the combat stuff. It seems like they're going hard to try to take Dying Light's first-person combat crown here. Seeing it in motion in gameplay trailers and stuff, it looks very similar to what we've grown used to with Dying Light. There's a strong and heavy attack, throwables, you can dodge to the left and to the right, and then even the classic dropkick. Skill cards seem like they could modify combat significantly. They add effects to certain attacks and even unlock new moves. You can also modify weapons with blueprints to unlock their own additional effects, and the weapons themselves can be thrown on top of swung around, and it's not all just close range weapons like in other games. It sounds like there's a large selection of long range throwing weapons and even guns in this game, just like the first Dead Island. We've also seen in stuff, it seems like there's a lot of environmental hazards you can use, like explosives and electrical traps to generate some chaos. The devs in some things have likened this to kind of something out of Divinity Original Sin 2, which sets a high standard for this sort of thing. We'll see if it ends up being a major component of the game or just another bullet point to put on the back of the box. Still, right now, combat looks pretty visceral and pretty satisfying, but we're gonna have to wait and see how well it holds up in the final game and how long it'll really hold our interest. Next, over at number 7, let's talk about the flesh system. Now, the devs are clearly proud of the way you can slash, smash, and bash zombies to pieces depending on what weapon you're using. Then this flesh system, which actually stands for Fully Locational Evisceration System for Humanoids, is how the game generates location-based damage. They want to make the most satisfying and disgusting zombie slaying possible. It's kind of like what they did with the Dead Space remake, but even more extreme. This system apparently has accurate skin, fat, and muscle simulation when you cut zombies, and bones break procedurally, sharp weapons cut where you actually slash them. It sounds really gross, but also very satisfying if it actually works the way they advertise. From what we've seen in previews, it does look pretty awesome. Now, many different zombie variants with different effects are around here, like electrified zombies, acid zombies, standard bomb-type zombies, these big ones with shockwaves, the usual fat guys. It's interesting to see if they add anything interesting here, or if we're mostly looking at the same kind of zombie spin-off variants every one of these types of games has. There are also these Apex variant zombies that we've seen that function as the game's bosses. You fight these in the story, I think, and after they appear, they start to show up regularly out in the open world, so that's something to keep an eye on. Next, over at number 6, each character has their own strengths and weaknesses, but instead of putting points into a skill tree to upgrade your character, in Dead Island 2, you get what I mentioned before, the skill cards. Some are universal, some are character specific, some you get for completing side quests, and there are a lot of ways to get them. We don't know for sure, but they seem like they're the main mechanic for improving your character's skills. Now, each character has 2 innate skill cards that they start out with, and you earn more as you level up. These cards cover everything from stat improvements to absolutely essential moves like dodging and blocking, and certain abilities are mapped to the same buttons, so it sounds like you can't block and dodge at the same time. It's like an either-or proposition. So note that the character Jacob has the Frenzy card, which gives him bonus damage for attacking multiple times in a row. Another example is Danny's Thunderstruck, which generates an explosion when you connect with a heavy attack. So while you can play your character using their unique skill cards, you can also just use the universal ones and build out the character any way you want. It seems like there are 5 different skill categories you can get cards for, and there's a limit to how many cards you can have equipped at one time. Next, over at number 5, there's this thing called the autophage bar. When you equip skill cards, some will be really good, but they increase your autophage level. It's sort of like radiation levels in Fallout or something, so the higher it gets, the more negative effects it'll have on your character, so it's sort of a balancing mechanic for these skill cards. This is one of the more mysterious elements of the game. It's not something we know a lot about at the moment. Previews and developers haven't talked too much about it, but it seems like it's going to add another layer of complexity onto how you build your character and how you actually have to think about it. This also might be tied to the quote-unquote zombie superpowers, which are apparently something you can get in this game, but as of right now, that's what we know. Next, over at number 4, just know that blue points work differently here than in most games. Now, in something like Dying Light, when you got a blueprint and you build an item, you just make one thing. It's a standard crafting thing, but like in this game, once you build something, you get an unlimited supply. So it works more like Doom Eternal or something where your throwables are just on a cooldown. So it sounds like looting craftable materials is less of a chore in this game because you're not being forced to constantly top off on consumables quite as much, but you can't go nuts with Molotovs in tight situations either. That doesn't mean you're not collecting a lot of stuff. You definitely are, but it sounds like there's less inventory management and wrangling when it comes to side weapons, at least. It looks like weapon mods cost you resources every time you attach them to something, though, so throwables just work differently from other blueprints, which sounds kind of cool in theory. Now, next, over at number 3, we mentioned a little bit of how the game works, but a special mention should be paid to the world design. Now, the first major zone apparently is set in Bel Air, where you can explore mega mansions and hotels, and very reminiscent of like the resort area from the original game, which is cool. They probably did that on purpose. The world looks legitimately fun to explore. There's a lot of detail, and from the previews, it sounds like there are a lot of locked doors, which should benefit exploration at least, but maybe frustrating for some people who don't want to hunt around for hidden keys. Either way, like the original game, there are some special dungeon interiors you can explore that are more elaborate, but earn you bigger rewards. The world doesn't change dynamically, like it doesn't seem like there's a day or night cycle. Time of day seems to be locked to story progression, think like Spider-Man games or something like that, where you finish a mission, you jump into the next, and the time has progressed. On the other hand, when you return to districts, you can then choose either day or night, and it changes how the zombies act. Next, over at number 2, it seems like they're going for a very certain tone here that will, to put it mildly, probably put some people off. It's very jokey, colorful, one might even say obnoxious, and pretty different from other zombie games. Not saying the whole original game was like some masterpiece of storytelling or anything like that, but just that it was different. Here, it seems like characters talk a lot from the footage we've seen. Their quest givers can be pretty obnoxious. The whole thing has more of like a Borderlands tone than grim survival horror, and that's by design. They wanted to do that intentionally and do something different. But how entertaining it'll actually be is a big question mark. At least they know people will find the chatter annoying and actually give you the option to turn it off. So that's a positive. Now, finally down to number 1, let's talk about the housekeeping. It's coming out April 21st, 2023, which is a week sooner than originally anticipated. I think they wanted to avoid competing with Jedi Survivor, but it is releasing on PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S, and PC on Steam and the Epic Games Store. There's the usual slew of pre-order bonuses, mostly in-game stuff, nothing huge like early access or anything, but if you like those digital goodies, I guess they're there. But those are 10 things you need to know about Dead Island 2 before jumping in, so be sure to check back here because we'll be doing a before you buy on the game while it releases, give you the gist, gameplay, and some review and stuff like that. But that's the info for today, so thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think of this game, what your expectations are, but otherwise, we'll just see you in the next one.